really cool. I want to turn it over to Jonathan. He's one of our fantastic EIRs, has been a director at places like Instacart. He's a founder of a company called Cabin, which he'll tell you about. And I don't want to take up any more time than that. So over to John.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chloe and Kevin. Really excited to be here and excited to talk to you about community-led growth and also I think even community-led product, really community-led everything, which I think is the future that we're headed towards. So this was a term that was shared with me by the HubSpot team. And the part of this that really stuck out to me was this sentence that I have bolded and underlined here. Okay, community-led growth, give shared ownership of your brand to the people who truly control it. That's what this is really all about. Okay, shared ownership of a brand with the community. So we're going to be talking about this a lot today. Please feel free to hop over to the chat at any point, throw in comments, throw in questions. I'll try to keep an eye on it as new responses roll in. I see a couple of folks right now already throwing things in there. Thank you, Lori and Mark. Awesome. So we'll talk through some frameworks, which is something we really like doing at Reforge, and then we'll talk about some examples we're seeing out in the wild of really cool versions of community-led growth. But this is really the core of it, right? What people say, we're giving the community ownership. Wow, really? Community ownership, right? And a lot of times people struggle with this because it's a kind of scary thing to actually jump off the diving board into community ownership of a brand and sharing that responsibility with your community. But I'm going to show you some examples today of how that can go really well and what it can look like when you really turn the reins over and even flip the script. And when I talk about flipping the script, what I mean here is that, I think when people talk about community, what they often mean is we have our customers, okay, we have our contributors or our employees, the people who run the company. And then we also have this thing called community that's like off in a little sidebar somewhere. And most people probably don't even know it exists and it doesn't really do very much. And what I'm here to suggest today is that the future we're headed towards is a future where these are all actually the same thing. Your customers are your contributors, are your community. And the lines here get very blurry. And community becomes a core part of everything you do and becomes the way that you build the product, becomes in some ways the interactions between the community become the core product. And they also become the way that you grow. So we're going to talk about frameworks. Thank you to Lori, who shared some slides with me and got me up to speed on some of the ways you all are thinking about this here at HubSpot, which I thought were fantastic. I'm going to unpack some of these frameworks and kind of talk about a set of examples, and then also a bit of a case study for Cabin, the organization that I work with. So these frameworks are growth loops. We're going to talk about how community can be deeply embedded into growth loops, which is a core concept we really like at Reforge. And then I'm also going to steal Lori's framework here of the 4 I's of community and talk about some of the tactics associated with how we go about building these types of communities. So we're going to start out here with growth loops. And this is the first opportunity for you to put on your thinking hat this morning, hop over to the chat and share some thoughts. So the first question that I have for you, as we look at this growth loop, this is a pretty standard framework we use in product and growth at Reforge. We talk about, the ways that attracting, engaging, and delighting or retaining customers can feed back into itself and cause the product to grow. So when we think about attracting people to a community, would love to hear any thoughts that folks have about what that might mean. What are good examples of how we can use community to natively attract people to our product? So I'll give you all a minute here. One of the things we learn at Reforge is that you have to provide awkward silences for people to actually respond to messages. So I'm just going to sit here for a second. Thank you as people are rolling these in. These are great. Tell stories that inspire people. Sharing content attracts. Yeah, these are fantastic. Okay. Outlets for user-generated content, testimonials, make people realize they aren't alone in their problems. These are all great answers. Okay. Word of mouth. Yeah, exactly. Okay. We're going to go on to the next one. Okay. Engage. What are some strategies for how you can engage a community? And I'm looking here for things that might go a little beyond the surface level. So, a lot of communities, maybe they're just a forum where you can like respond. That's a great place to start. Okay, how else can you really engage your community? Okay, AMA events, gamification, asking questions about hot topics, user groups, cool. Create a community culture, love that one. Okay, badges, collectibles, great answer. Okay, AMAs, competitions. Yes, that's a great one. I can tell you about some of the competitions we've done at Cabin later. We do something called guild games. Okay, and last one here, would love to hear your thoughts. How do you delight, or another way to think about this may be like, how do you retain members of your community? Okay, recognition. Perks, incentives, super user programs, over deliver. Nice. Okay, cool. Yeah, positive reinforcement, swag, behind the scenes access, inclusion, affiliate discounts, money. Yeah, okay, cool. We will talk about all of these. Great answers. Thank you everyone for the participation. There's going to be a lot more of that, so keep your fingers on your keyboards. What I'm going to talk to you about today is the path that I've seen communities using recently to really nail this growth loop. And here's what it looks like. It looks like figuring out with your community, what is our shared adventure? Okay. How can I get involved with that adventure? And then what have we actually accomplished? So I'm going to talk through each of these. I'm going to give you some cool examples of some organizations out in the world right now that are really doing an amazing job at each of these three things. So the first one, what is our shared adventure? There's this fantastic quote. You may have seen it before. Startups like to use it for stuff. If you want to build a ship, don't drum up the men to gather wood, divide the work, and give orders. Instead, teach them to yearn for the vast and endless sea. Okay. This is a great example of how we think about shared adventures and bringing together a community to go on an adventure. What we're seeing with a lot of the best community organizations right now is that they have a single thing that they are doing. It's a really clear, easy, big, audacious goal that they want to go tackle. And you can join that adventure and you can go tackle that goal with them. Anybody have an example of a community that's very good at this kind of call to action of a shared adventure, something that's simple but audacious and exciting? Feel free to drop it in the chat if you can think of any. Okay, Kevin says sports teams. Yes, that is a fantastic one. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Any other ideas? Fitness cults. Yeah. Soul Cycle is like basically a religion at this point. It's like that is a yearning for the sea. Stack Overflow, PTA. Awesome. Okay, these are great examples. I'm going to share a couple of the coolest organizations out there on the internet right now that I think are doing this, and also just some case studies from the past. So, this quote is from a long time ago. I think the maybe like 2021 version of this quote looks something more like this: "Get in, loser. We're buying the Constitution." Who here has heard of Constitution DAO? give me either a hand, or you can do a shout out in the chat. Yes. Okay, cool. We got some people who have heard of Constitution DAO. So this is an example of what I'm talking about, right? This is like this very mimetically driven, idea. That's this big, crazy idea, right? We're going to go raise $47 million and buy one of the remaining 13 copies of the US Constitution. I was fortunate enough to have a first row seat to this one. I was on the core team and the multi-sig, the wallet that controlled the funds for this, which was a little bit crazy experience for about a week in November of last year. And what was magical about Constitution DAO was that it was so simple, right? It was this very clear action. There was a really clear deadline. It was like we had 5 days, to raise this money. And it was a really easy ask to people. Contribute, right? You can see this was the website. This was about maybe 2 or 3 days into it when we when we just crossed $6 million. And there's just one thing you can do: contribute, right? And then go share with your friends. And so this was a really powerful meme. You can see this this sort of parentheses, scroll, comma, scroll. This became its own mimetic thing that was all over Twitter. People were putting this in their Twitter bios, on their names, and it just spread like wildfire. Okay, so that's an example, but you may be thinking, okay, well, that was like kind of a weird one-time, thing that lasted for a week. There's another example of this that I'll share that I think is very cool and ongoing and is related to sports, which Kevin mentioned. So this is Kraus House. Kraus House is a community of hoop fanatics just crazy enough to buy an NBA team. Okay, so this is a group of people. They have crowdfunded a whole lot of money. They've built an organization. They actually purchased a 3-on-3 basketball team recently called the Ball Hogs. And their long-term goal is to work their way up to an NBA team, to basically convince the league to let them take a minority stake and then ultimately take a majority stake in an NBA team and own and operate an NBA team as a community and as a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. So this is a great example because it's so simple, it's so clear, right? They want to buy an NBA team, but it's a crazy goal. Like, it's something that's going to take a long time and a lot of resources to figure out how to accomplish. And so there's a lot of ways to get involved. And that's really the next stage of this, right? Is how can I get involved? Okay, so this is another framework I from adapted a little bit, but basically she said that community is basically just high engagement frequency and belief alignment, which I really agree with. And then there's also sort of this concept here in this chart of concentric circles of engagement, right? And this ends up being a really important part of communities. You want to provide a lot of ways for people to get involved. You want to provide ways for people who are sort of like loosely interested, maybe busy, think the idea is cool, but are not necessarily like diehard fans. You want to provide ways for them to get involved, and you want to provide ways for people who really are just deeply attached to the mission that you're going after to get really actively involved. Okay, and you kind of have to figure out how to navigate this whole spectrum. So we'll do the same thing again in the chat. Would love to hear any examples of organizations that you think are really good at giving people ways to get involved, communities that give you an easy way to plug in or give you a way to plug in really deeply to their mission. Okay, Habitat for Humanity, great example, right? You can show up, you can swing a hammer, or you can really, be deeply involved, build houses for people. I mean, just such a good salient example of something that you can get deeply involved with. Okay, any other thoughts, ideas for communities that make it easy to plug in or give you a path to get really deeply involved with them? Yeah, political campaigns, Matt. That's a great example, right? I have a friend who works in political campaigns who told me that the goal of a yard sign is partially to mark your house as a place for the next set of canvassers to come and ask for a donation, because it's an easy ask, right? Like, hey, you support this candidate, we'll give you a free yard sign, put it in your yard. Oh, great. Now your house is like a billboard, not only for the candidate, but for other people to come ask you for money. So that's an example of, right, this sort of like scaling up of community engagement. Okay, cool. Someone's off mute. So maybe you could just throw yourself on mute unless you're coming up on stage to talk. Yeah, change.org, membership associations. These are great examples. Okay, awesome. I'm going to talk about a couple that I think are really cool, that do a good job at this. One of them is not something that like I find, very personally interesting as a mission. Like I don't watch a lot of reality TV shows, but I think they do a really good job of this type of easy engagement. Okay, and it's called Proof of Love. And it's run by an organization called Mad Realities that's trying to create the first essentially community-driven reality TV show online. And you can look at, you go to their website, you're immediately greeted with this stack of cards. And, it tells you this is the world's first dating show where the community decides what happens and who happens. Okay, you want to be on the show, you can apply, you can nominate your friends, you can also swipe through these cards and, much like a dating app, right, you can choose if you think these people should be on the show. Which is pretty wild. Like you just show up on a website, you join this community, and you immediately get to participate in the production of this reality TV show. So, not my thing, but a pretty cool example of easy engagement. Okay, another example here of much deeper engagement. This is a project called Nouns, and Nouns is this kind of crazy idea where once every 24 hours, there's an NFT that gets generated. It's a computer generated NFT. That's this pixel art. So you can see, this is the screenshot from the other day. It's a cat. And every day it looks a little different. They sell one of these things and anybody can bid and buy one of these. Okay, you can see this thing selling for about 100 ETH. Okay, that's about $100,000 right now. And if you look up in the left-hand corner there, you can see the treasury, the total amount of money in this community is about $27 million. Okay, and so they've basically been selling one of these generative pieces of pixel art per day, adding all of that money into a shared bank account, essentially. Okay, on chain, it's a crypto thing. And then what they do is they entertain proposals. Okay, so anybody can go to them now and say, you have $27 million and growing every day. And here's something I want to do to contribute to this community. Okay, and if you hold one of these NFTs, you can nominate proposals and you can vote on them. And so it's this kind of wild form of participatory community building where all they started with was this art. And now they're doing all kinds of things. They're making clothing brands. They are investing in other companies. They are, doing philanthropy work. They are, looking at like sponsoring an esports team. It's just like all over the map, these proposals, right? And it just gives you a way to get really deeply engaged with this community that started from really nothing other than the idea of creating a place for deep engagement. Okay, so that's Nouns. If you want to check it out, nouns.wtf, I believe. Okay, so that's the second phase, of the growth loop. And now we're on to the third phase, delight. And for delight, I think it's really about what we've accomplished together. So this is a chart or a picture from this really great presentation on how organizations are like slime molds. The link is down there in the corner. It's a really great set of slides you can click through, which I would highly recommend. But really what people want, right, from joining these communities is to participate and then actually have something happen as a result. Okay, and so you can think about this as charting this kind of like chaotic path audacious goal. And you do this by experiments. You run a lot of experiments, you entertain a lot of ideas and proposals, and you kind of aren't making direct progress towards the goal. You're weaving along and you're adapting to the community's interests, but ultimately you're headed in the right direction because everyone is aligned around this mission. And you may have heard this term that gets thrown around, in Web3 a lot, WAGMI. We're all going to make it. And you can interpret this term a couple of ways. One way to interpret it is, we're all going to make it. We're all going to make money, or we're all going to get rich, or whatever. That's the less interesting version of it, to me at least. The interpretation that I really like is we're all going to make it. We're all going to create this thing together. Okay, that's like the big unlock here that I think a lot of these new tools that have developed recently are creating for online communities, is the ability to actually pool resources together and then make a thing together. Actually, we're all going to make it. Okay, any cool examples that people can share about communities that have come together and made a thing? So Kevin shared Habitat for Humanity earlier. That's a great example, right? Communities come together, building housing. Any other examples of a community that has maybe produced something surprising or interesting that you wouldn't have expected a bunch of random strangers or people that don't work together every day to create? Linux, yeah, fantastic example. Free Britney movement, yeah, totally. Meow Wolf, oh man, yeah, Heather, great call. If anyone here hasn't heard of Meow Wolf, would definitely recommend checking it out. They're just these incredible immersive art exhibits that are starting to pop up in different cities that were made by an artist collective. These are all great because they're so different, right? Linux, you have like the core of an operating system. Free Britney movement is like a social movement. Meow Wolf is this art installation. These are all like very different examples, but great ones of how communities come together. The one that I remember first seeing on the internet that really was the first time I was like, wow, the internet is going to do some amazing things together, was Reddit/r/place. I don't know if anybody remembers this. I probably should have put a screenshot in here, but it was this blank canvas, that Reddit opened up and let people go and change the color of pixels, and people created this incredible image, right? And this was probably a decade ago. And since then, the tools have gotten so much better. And so now the internet is starting to bring together large groups of strangers to do pretty wild things. So one example of that happened recently that I want to share here is called Chaos. It's a headless band that came out of an organization, a DAO called Songcamp. And Chaos was a group of 45 musicians, 9 visual artists, 7 operators, 6 devs, radio producers, economists, scribes. Okay, all these people from the internet came together and produced a headless band, produced 45 songs that formed this, where basically every 2 weeks, a random musicians were grouped together and also assigned an artist. And they had 2 weeks to make a song and produce the art for that song. And they ended up creating this incredible set of music that you can go check out. You can listen to it all. You can also buy these songs as NFTs. Then they hosted this amazing online festival to sort of roll out and announce this thing. Tons of people in Discord, just like insanity in the chat, lots of fun. And they produced some really great music. And it ended up being actually, it was on the Billboard charts for the top selling music NFT recently. #1, these Chaos packs, they made about $500,000 for the artists involved in this project, and ended up, outselling some very well-known artists who were doing NFT music like Eminem and Snoop Dogg. So, it really shows like the power of these collective groups coming together, forming for a short period of time, using some of these new tools to split the money that they make, and then disbanding and being over. Okay, awesome. Another example that I'll share here is near and dear to my heart, which is Cabin's Build Weeks. So Cabin is building a decentralized city for online creators. And these pictures are from where I live outside of Austin, Texas. We call it Neighborhood Zero. And we bring groups from Cabin, which is a DAO, out to the Texas Hill Country to build physical things together. So these are a bunch of internet strangers, none of whom, who had met each other before this. And the guy at the top left there holding the shovel in the picture, standing up on the ladder, his name's Charlie. He is a student, architecture student in Canada. And all these other folks are people from all over the world who are a part of the DAO. And Charlie designed this pergola, and fire pit and patio. And then everyone here just showed up out in the Texas Hill Country and worked together to build this thing. Okay. There was no single planner for the whole thing. Charlie did the designs. You can see Catherine there also on the ladder, hosted, helped make sure everybody was participating in cooking and cleaning and, those sorts of things. I helped drive this skid steer on this piece of heavy machinery you see there. And everybody just contributed in the ways that they could contribute. And we were able to create this incredible community space out at the property. This is just one example of a build week. We've done more of these. Our most recent one, we built a sauna, which was something that the DAO really wanted to build. I was a little skeptical, if we really needed a sauna in Texas. It's already kind of a sauna in the summers. But it turns out it's actually amazing, and I use it almost every day. So there is a wisdom and a collective intelligence to these types of organizations. And this is what people really love, right? Is actually building things together. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more about Cabin. I'm going to use it as a case study to walk through these eyes of community-led growth. And then, just a little bit more content here. Then we'll make sure to spend a good chunk of time on Q&A, bringing people up on stage to share some thoughts, ask questions, etc. So, all of this is good and well. You may be thinking like, okay, I get it. There's this growth loop. You want these sort of like reinforcing feedback loops of people, getting excited about a mission, finding ways to contribute, getting involved, building something together. How do we actually do this? Like, how do you set up the structure through which this is actually going to happen successfully? Because it sounds a little crazy and, chaotic. And frankly, it often is when you're just bringing together a lot of strangers from the internet to build a thing and to grow a thing together. So this is a good roadmap for how to think about the core components of actually building one of these systems. We can use Cabin as a case study to talk through them. So the first one here is incentives, okay? And the big learning that we've had from our time building co-living communities at Cabin is that you really need to build communities that tap into people's needs for both intrinsic and extrinsic rewards and motivations, okay? And so if you just do one of these things, right, extrinsic rewards, like I'll get paid $5, is a great way to, kind of like motivate people to do a very specific thing that you need them to do. But it actually is a really bad way to build community in many cases, because once you give people an extrinsic reward, they often substitute it for their otherwise intrinsic motivations. And so there's a delicate balance here, right? You want to give people, real ownership and real compensation, but you also want to create ways that people can be intrinsically motivated, that they can see their ideas brought to life, that they can be publicly recognized, that they can feel like a good and helpful person. So kind of two ends of the spectrum of how this works at Cabin. More on the extrinsic side is an idea that we call manifesting your role. This is an example a proposal that one of our core contributors submitted to basically create his role within the DAO and within the organization that then the organization votes on. And this idea of manifesting your role and actually getting compensated for it, actually being a participant and getting rewards for that is a very core part of what makes DAOs work. But there's another side to this, which also comes from actually the co-living community that Phil started and lives in. And that is a Slack channel called Bilbo Braggins. And the idea here is just like every time somebody does a thing, rather than having like a chore chart where it's like, this is your week to take out the trash. They don't have any of that. They just have this channel where they just encourage people to basically brag about the things that they did, the chores that they completed. And it's a way more fun and intrinsically motivated way to make sure that the community is taking care of itself. Okay, so balancing this, I think, is the key to incentives. Next one here is identity. Okay, this is about your sense of belonging, credentials, skills, and interests. This is something where Web3 is really excelling. And an example here from Cabin is our passports. So this is a picture of our Cabin passport card. It's a physical chip embedded card that can hold NFTs, what we call passport stamps, that represent your roles within the community. And we think of these a lot like a similar set of problems that humans have solved over time, which is like patches, badges, medals. If you look at this picture, right, I was a Boy Scout growing up, and I remember getting merit badges, and you can take a look at another Boy Scouts uniform and know a whole lot about where they come from, what rank they are, what kinds of things they've done in the organization. And many types of organizations, from the Boy Scouts to the Hells Angels, use this same method of community identity. And so I think we're going to see a whole lot more of this online, where people will get these stamps or these credentials that represent things they participated in, things they did, skills they have, whatever, within the community. And then that will become the data layer for, I think, the future of social networks, where people will use these as vibe checks. People will use these, you can even imagine a future world where, with this physical passport card that I have the picture of here, based on the stamps you have in your wallet, in your passport, we can unlock doors. So if you participated in a thing, if you have a certain skill set, whatever you like, it can literally unlock doors. I think that's the future we're headed towards. Okay, the next one is interactions. Okay, this is the programs, groups, ways that people get together, ways they actually interact. This is really the core of what communities are about. This is why people join communities. They want to meet other people, that are like-minded and that share their interests. I think the key here, going back to that engagement idea of, different levels of engagement for a community, is that you really want to have a wide range of things. You want to have easy ways for people to get involved, like joining a Twitter space and then maybe popping into the Discord. You want to have more intense ways for them to get involved, participating in governance, showing up to an event in person, right? Helping launch a project. And if you can do this, you can give people essentially a funnel of engagement where maybe they just follow you on Twitter right now, but at some point in the future, maybe they're going to come have one of these life-changing experiences that you can provide. So there are some quotes here at the bottom from some people who participated in some of those experiences at Cabin. That's what you really want to aim for. That's the North Star. How do you get to the point where people feel like, yes, this is one of the most fulfilling experiences I've had. It's been a thrill and an honor to participate in this community. Okay, cool. And then the last one is infrastructure, which is, the least important, right? I think people spend a lot of time talking about tools. You'll notice almost everything I shared in this presentation comes from Web3, right? It comes from the world of DAOs and NFTs and whatever, but I don't talk a whole lot about that because they're important technologies that underlie a lot of the ability to provide this type of community-led ownership of a brand. But that's not what people are showing up for. So we can talk more about this tech stack. This is from a blog post that we did at Cabin called How to DAO. And it sort of lays out the phases of building a community from scratch, how to recruit, fund, coordinate, deliver, and the sort of tools that exist now to be able to use this stuff. Everything from kind of getting the word out on Twitter to bringing funds into a shared crypto, essentially bank account, a shared wallet, to creating places for people to engage, places for them to actually start building things together, voting on proposals, et cetera. There's an amazing new tool stack that has been developed in the last couple of years that enables communities to do all of this stuff in ways that they haven't been able to do it before. So if you're interested, we can talk more about that part as well. Okay. So the kind of end result here, if you think about that growth loop again, you think about all these tactics you've gone through, how do you know that this is working? This is how, right? These are all unsolicited tweets from the last couple months that people have put out about Cabin. You can see they're all over the map. These are people, some of them are joining an onboarding session that we're doing. Some of them are doing an IRL program. Some of them are listening to our podcast. Some of them are just like tweeting about us because they heard about us and they were excited about it, right? This is how you know that the growth loop has completed itself. You've attracted people, you've given them, some way to get involved, and you've, produced some outcome, and now they're sharing that with the world. They're getting out there and they're saying, wow, this was an amazing thing. I'm a part of it. It's a part of my identity. You should be a part of it too. That's really how the growth loop closes, and, how you start to see this sort of compounding growth benefits of community-led growth. Okay. That was all the slides I have, and now would love to open it up for a bit of a conversation. That conversation can happen now. We've got a couple minutes left, and then I can stick around, and then also my DMs are open. So if there's anything that we don't get to now, feel free to shoot me a DM. Would love to chat with anybody. If you'd like to go ahead and raise your hand now, we can do a couple questions, a little bit of Q&A. And you can go ahead and just use the hand raise feature here in Zoom. So if you go down to the bar and actually not seeing the emoji reactions on this Zoom. Do folks have the emoji reacts?
Yeah, they should be closer. You have to expand the window a little bit, but I can see them, but it's my meeting. So please let me know if no one else can see them.
Jonathan, while we're waiting for questions, do you want to talk a little bit about the programs you're leading at Reforge?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for the segue there, Kevin. So yeah, I am an EIR at Reforge. I'm leading a program this cycle, which kicks off very soon here, called Data for Product Managers. A lot of my background at Instacart was building very data-driven teams, and so I've led programs in experimentation and testing and data for PMs. It's going to be a great cohort. We've got some really incredible folks joining for the weekly sessions that'll be, talking to us about their personal experiences. Reforge tends to be very case study driven content. And that's just one of the many programs. So whether you're looking for something more focused on growth or product engineering, there's probably a Reforge program for you. And Kevin, let me know if this is true, but I think it may still be possible to sign up for this cohort, or are we close?
Yep. Yeah, it is still possible.
Okay, wonderful.
I'll ask another one unless someone else has one. So a lot of the examples you gave were like Web3. What are your thoughts on say HubSpot, say Reforge, traditional Web 2 companies, and how you think about community-led growth for them?
Yep. So I think the cutting edge of this stuff is coming out of Web3, because Web3 is so naturally aligned with this idea of community ownership of a brand and literal ownership, usually in the form of some sort of token or NFT or whatever. And so I think the sort of cutting edge examples of this are coming out of Web3, but a lot of these same ideas are very applicable to Web2, right? It just requires taking a step back and saying, how can we really bring the community in and give them an actual role to play in defining what our brand is and where we're headed. And that's a big step. That's a really hard thing for a lot of traditional companies to do. But there's no sort of like other way to get these amazing results from bringing a group together like this, other than giving them real ownership of the direction of the brand and the organization. And so that's why I think we're starting to see some Web2 companies make that sort of transition. It's typically organizations like Reddit who are very community native who make the leap first, and we're starting to see some of it from Facebook and Meta. But it requires a new way of thinking and a new way of approaching the world. That is going to be hard for some organizations to make the leap. Cool. If anybody wants to just come off mute and ask a question, that's also totally cool. So feel free to just hop off and jump in here if you have a question.
Hey, Jonathan, I just have a question about your opinion about something. So you mentioned Reddit as it is the community of communities, right? And the thing about Reddit is people will post whatever they're thinking, and they don't consider like the professional side of what they are creating, because they just are posting it in. It could have grammatical mistakes. It could, it's just a raw thought. And I find that in like professional communities that people are considering their personal brand when they're posting, but there's less insight, data, true problem solving that can occur because people are kind of masking what they're writing as something, to be professionally associated with their LinkedIn profile. So in your experience, like, have you seen any great examples of companies that have been able to take what happens in Reddit, where it's like the raw organic comments where you can find answers or things people have tried to anything, and bring it into a professional community where there's like a hybrid between the two? Like, how do you achieve both natural and organic and professional and associated with who you are?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, because it really gets at the core of this idea that, for community-led growth to really succeed, community has to be, your contributors, has to be your customers. You really do have to blur those lines. And that's a hard part, right? To say like my professional identity and my online identity are going to be the same. There's a couple ways to approach this. One is, essentially pseudonymous accounts, which now you can make a living online participating in communities as a pseudonymous person. So for instance, Kraus House, the group trying to buy the NBA team, their two founders are, they go by Commodore and Flex. And I've met these guys IRL. I still don't know their real names. And that's like a world we can live in now, where you can make money, you can build reputation around whatever identity you want, and you can have multiple identities. You can be one person in one community and another person in a different professional setting.
Thanks for sharing. It's a great example.
Yeah, thank you, Christopher. Awesome. Other questions? Or just comments, thoughts, feedback on the presentation, anything?
I love the Boy Scout example.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that's I think Boy Scouts are, there's 50 million living Boy Scout alumni, and they're probably one of the best examples of a group that has actually built this sort of deep community within American culture.
Victor asked a question in the chat, which is, when do you make community membership paid versus free versus both?
Great question, Victor. Yeah. So I think, if you think back to that sort of chart of the engagement levels, what you want to do is create different ways for people to engage that allow them to, it's sort of like a freemium product. You want to create ways for people to like dip their toes into the water. and get a sense of what the community is all about, because it's very hard to get anybody to commit to like paying to participate in a community if they have no idea what it is. And then you want to, create like increasing opportunities for people to get more deeply involved that may be paid, they may be, token gated or NFT gated. They may have other requirements for participation. They may just have to go through an onboarding process. But you want to kind of have like these different levels of engagement that get increasingly strong and deep. Okay, I see another hand up. Yeah, you can go ahead and bring yourself off mute. I'd love to hear your question.
Hi, Jonathan. So I think like how the online communities, they have evolved a lot in the past few years, like now, especially with millennials and Gen Z generations, I think community is like a gateway to be relaxed and entertained. My personal favorite is Marvel community because like, especially in the recent years, Marvel has started to entertain their LGBTQ plus and cosplay communities. They're kind of like trying to show this, they're trying to battle a lot of stereotypes in the superhero culture. They're trying to battle, like they come up with stories about racism, sexism, homophobia, and so many. So they try to like constantly speak about that. So it's also, it's becoming a community effort, but it's also like kind of like representing in their, it also bringing them box office success. So they're kind of like handling it really well, where they're trying to talk about these stereotypes, but it's also resulting in their box office as well. So at what point can a community effort become more not just brand oriented, but also more community specific, like giving back to the community? So where do we find that balance?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think media is not something I talked about a lot here, but is a really great example of where we're starting to see interesting community-led projects. A couple I'll throw out. There's one called StoryDAO. There's another one called CryptoZ. They are both, attempts to basically do storytelling in community and to start to build brands like Marvel or Disney, but as an online collective. And I think that's a really powerful thing because you see this stuff happen naturally. To your point, like Star Wars, there's a thing called Wikipedia. It's like a whole Wikipedia just about like the greater Star Wars universe. It's wild to go poke around in. And like, so there's this deep interest in, people being a part of stories and wanting to, like contribute in some way. And they haven't really had good ways to do that as part of the brand before, but now you can close that loop. It's not just like, okay, they went and made Wikipedia. It's like they could actually help create the story that, gets told in the next version of the canon. And that I think is a huge unlock. And that really is at the core of what this is all about. It's really storytelling, right? It's how do you think about memes? How do you think about stories that are going to really deeply resonate with people in a way that makes them want to contribute to it and want to make it a part of their identity? And if you can figure out how to do that, then you've figured out how to build a really successful community. Okay, I know we're a couple minutes over time, and I think that actually may be a great spot to end on, but really appreciate everybody's time and also engagement in the presentation. Thank you to folks who participated in chat, who asked questions. If you have any more questions, like I said, my DMs are open. Here's my Twitter handle. Please feel free to reach out. Would love to talk more about community-led growth. Thank you so much to HubSpot for hosting this and having me here today. Thank you to Lori and Chloe for setting it up. And thanks to Reforge and Kevin. Would love to have anybody here participate in our upcoming program.
Jonathan, thank you so much for joining us. This was a great session.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.